Hi, I'm going to be working on pressing to advantage in an 11 against 11 format. The formations for the team that I'd be coaching would be in the 1-4-3-3, and on the whiteboard they're represented by the O's, so the zeros, which is red. Hopefully you can see that. And the opposition will be playing in a 1-4-4-2 formation. Now in the 1-4-4-3, the midfield would be a diamond. Now pressing to advantage, I take that to mean when to press and when to drop. And so the objectives for the practice would be based around that. The objectives would be developing when and how to press, and also developing when and how to drop. Now I'm going to be looking at the field this way. I would be coaching this team here, and I'd be managing the opposition. Now the starting position would change according to where the ball is. So in this practice I would want to start from pressing high up the field. The reason for that is because I think that that's where defending actually begins. It begins with your strikers. So I would start this practice with the ball being played out by the goalkeeper for the opposition team. As it's being played out, I would be positioned in a wide area near the start of the play. So that, hopefully you can see that. That's a C, and that stands for the coach, and that will be me. So that would allow me to see as much as I can of what I'm expecting the players to see, and that would be in that area there. So that's why I'd be standing there. So I'd explain this to the players, send them out, have them organised in the formation, and I'd start the practice. I would observe the practice. I'd take a look at the setup and make sure that everything is kind of as it should be. Making sure I've got the right amount of players on the field. So it's an 11 against 11, so we should have 22 out there. I'd make sure that the area is appropriate. It should be. I shouldn't have to have amended a great deal. However, if it looks like the area is maybe too big for what we're trying to do, I might consider even making the area smaller if it looks like the players are struggling with the size of the field. Ordinarily, it should be fine. It's 11 against 11, use a full size field. I'd observe them for maybe just over a minute. That should allow them time to settle into the practice, and also it would allow me time to calm my nerves, and to observe whether or not the setup's appropriate. So, remembering what the aim is of the practice, to develop when and how to press and to develop when and how to drop. I will stop the practice on about 1.5 minutes. I'd ask the team that I am managing to make sure that they are in the right shape. I'd remind them of what the formation is supposed to be. So I'd say to them, take a look around, make sure that you understand and can show that you are standing or positioned in a 1-4-4-2 formation. So that's going to be me managing the opposition. I would then physically maybe move around the team that I'm coaching to get them into their own shape, which should be the 1-4-3-3. And then I'd start the practice again. I'd start the practice again with the goalkeeper distributing. Goalkeeper would distribute wide to the right-sided defender. So distribute wide from the goalkeeper to the number 2. At that point, I would immediately work with the front 2 players. The player nearest the ball should be the number 10. Oh, I apologise, it would be the number 11. So it's a 4-3-3, it would be the number 11 for the team that I'm coaching. I'd work on how that player decides when to move to apply the pressure on the number 2. I would ask the player to recognise the trigger of when he or she should move. That trigger will be when the goalkeeper takes a look at the player and physically looks like they're about to pass the ball, either out of their hands or through their feet. So as that goalkeeper looks across and raises the arm to distribute or pulls the leg back to pass, then I'll say that's your trigger to make your movement, and your movement has to be quick, but not so quick that you can't decelerate. So at that point I would work on the acceleration and deceleration of the number 11. That would be when to press on the trigger point. Now the deceleration and acceleration and the positioning of the body, so having a front foot, so that's one leg that is advanced. The player should be slightly to the side, bent knees so they're nice and supple and they can be agile, and when they get there they should be at a distance which should allow them to literally physically indicate to the opposition player, indicate to the number 2 where they want them to make their next movement, and that will be how to press. So our objectives there for the individual player, starting with the front players, will be when and how to press and when and how to drop. When and how to drop will be when you get there and the number 2 recognises that they can't advance because you're there. When that player then looks as if they're going to pass back or pass across, and the trigger for you would be when that opposition player looks up towards their teammate and they look like they're about to pass, distribute the ball, then that would be when to drop. Now how to drop will be not spinning around so you can't see the play. So make sure you still can see the play, so physically still face it. It's a slight movement back, but it's preparation to curve your run so that you move slightly across to the direction where the ball is being played. And then as that's happening, I would make it clear that that's going to be how to drop. When the ball's played across, I will then physically move on to the player that is nearest to the ball as it's being moved across, and that should be the number 9. So in that picture, I'm painting a picture that the number 2 has played the ball across the back line and missed out one of the centre backs. So if that happens, I would check the realism of it. Is it realistic that the player would play a ball across the back of the line? In some circumstances it would be, depending on how close the pressure is. So if that happens, I would manage the opposition, and I'd explain that realistically, if there's high pressure because the number 9 is quick, or they're tactically quite astute and they've recognised the trigger really early, so they physically are able to get there earlier because they know what you're about to do, then the pass across the line wouldn't be one which is realistic to the game, because it's easy for the opposition to steal, and we want to make it realistic. So what I do is I then explain that even though I'm not going to be coaching the opposition, the expectation is that they play realistically. And at that point I'd encourage the number 2 to play the ball back to the centre back, to the number 5. So at this point I'd be working with the number 9 and asking them to basically mirror almost the line of the ball, because then we're going to be working on how we press, especially when the ball's central, because now the ball has moved from the right sided defender, which is in the wider area, being played back to the centre back. And because of our formation, I would explain to that individual player that their role becomes one of recognising the principles of defending. So one of those principles is that you've got to have a bit of composure. So as that ball is being played back to the centre back, that is going to be making the play predictable for the team. So I'd explain to the individual player that at that point your job is to be patient and make the play predictable and to show composure. Just delay the movement of the ball into the wider areas. I would then ask the individual player to recognise that the movement that they make has to be one that encourages the passes to go into the central area. So me working with the number 9, I'd be physically demonstrating to them the movement that would encourage the ball to go central. So if the ball is with the centre back, the movement would be curved. If the ball is played back to the goalkeeper, our number 9 would half mark the space and just pop themselves central, not necessarily going forward, because that would encourage an aerial pass by the goalkeeper, or it would encourage a quick pass wide. So we just want the striker to have bent their run and then make a movement which is half into space and half going forward. So that means that they're not going to be overcommitting themselves, and that will be the reason why they make that movement as their pressing movement. That's how they're going to press. It's not going to be an urgent high press. It's going to be like a medium press. I would then ask our attacking players, so our number 11, our 9 and our 7, to work as a unit. So now I'm going to be moving on from working with the individual players to working with the unit, the front three. I'm going to be asking them to recognise when to provide a little bit of composure, so as the ball is played back, and then I'm going to ask them to recognise who can provide that little bit of balance for that area of the field. So as the ball is being played back, they're going to make almost like a triangle. And in that triangle, they would provide a little bit of medium pressure and some depth and some balance, depending on the side of where the ball is being played. That's going to be the picture that I'm going to look to create with the front three players. The triangle, one person pressing, but not a high press if the ball is going back. Now moving on, I would then allow some free play to observe whether or not our attacking players are able to replicate that. I would have demonstrated it on my own, physically showing them the movement. I would then watch them replay it and demonstrate it. I would then allow them to go live. I would observe that for a couple of minutes. I would then compose myself and recognise the objectives in line with the topic. So I'd have to calm down, watch the players, make sure that the shape of both teams is still realistic. I'd then remind myself in my head what the topic is called, press into advantage, and what we're trying to get out of that topic. So when and how to press, when and how to drop. I'd recognise that I've worked with the individual in the striking position. So one of the attackers I've worked with, I've then recognised that I worked with the number 9, and then recognised that I worked with the unit. I then might think to myself, is there anything I've missed? Should I move on now to working with the midfield? So I wouldn't do anything else apart from just think, should I move on now to working with the midfield? I think about where I'm standing. So I might even move. I might move and go cross field, just go across to the opposite side, because I'd be conscious of the fact that maybe I haven't really worked as much with the 7. So I'd spend a little bit more time there watching the 7 and seeing whether the 7 recognises when they should press. So I wouldn't work with the midfield just yet. I'd hang fire, I'd wait. I would wait for a new start position. When the ball looks like it's being transferred into midfield, I'd wait for a brand new start position for when the ball looks like it's being played into midfield. I'd then see when the number 7's standing. Often the players will allow big spaces because maybe they get a bit tired, and I'd stop that. I'd be looking for the space and I'd stop it. So I'd stop the play where I could see an opportunity to work with the 7 so that I could affect that player. Press to advantage. So for that we've got to reduce the spaces. We've got to be compact. So I would encourage the number 7 to work within the unit, to recognise when to squeeze the diamond, so squeeze that little triangle that they would have created. So within the triangle I would be asking the 7 to just manage the spaces a bit better. So for me, I would demonstrate to them the picture that you should create when you're screening the play. So I would encourage them to communicate and work with the 9 and the 11, and also maybe with one of the midfielders, so that we look like we're about to make a progression. We look like we understand now that we work a wee bit more with the midfield, because it looks like we're about to have a transition from the attacking third into midfield. So I'd ask the number 7 to start thinking about the relationship that they have with the midfield. It's very important, I think, that I try to stress the importance, or try to stress the reasons that we need to communicate, and that's because of having a connection within each of the units. So I'd ask the number 7 to demonstrate that connection, that relationship. So they should get used to screening the play. They should get used to minimalising the spaces between themselves and the 9 and the 10. Sorry, the 11. The demonstration would just be one to show screening. So just making sure that they stay compact within their triangle. I would then allow some free play. The free play would give me time to think, to make sure, is there a chance that I missed something? Am I standing in the right position? And I would recognise that we're now allowing the transition into the middle third, so I'm not standing in the right position anymore, and I'll move. And I'll position myself in midfield. I might even tuck myself a bit further behind because it's a defending topic. So I'm probably a little bit too square on in this particular image. So in order to see what the players should be seeing in a defensive position, I might want to go a little bit further back. I'd remind myself of the principles of defending. So I'd start thinking, am I going through a checklist? Am I ticking the principles of delaying, of showing depth, of being composed, of being concentrated, so having good focus, and am I showing good is the unit compact? I'd watch for that, and there's a big chance that the next one for me to look at would be concentration. I think concentration is really important because in midfield they'll probably be running around lots and lots, but we're working on when to press, when to drop, how to press, how to drop. So I'd stop the play and I'd work with the midfielder, the number 8, when to press, when to drop, how to press, how to drop. My next picture would be whether or not they're recognising the that transition that's taken place. So is the transition that's taken place from the attacking third into midfield one which has allowed the number 8 to show us when to drop? I think that it's a difficult one in terms of you don't want to force something. You don't want to force something to happen if it's not happening, you know. But that is what I'd be looking for. Are we managing the passes in between? Are we managing the passes high? So I'd start thinking to myself when I stop it, what is the number 8 doing when the ball's transferring? So just to paint the picture, if the ball is with the number 4, so the defensive midfielder for the opposition, if the ball's here, I would be looking to see if the number 8, if they're getting there quickly enough. I might even praise them. I might say to them, you're doing a fantastic job, because I can see that you're looking to get there and you're looking to reduce the advancement of that number 4 of that player. So excellent, well done. But remembering the objectives, when to press, when to drop, how to press, how to drop. I might encourage them to press with a bit of a purpose. Press with a purpose. So when I stop, I will connect that number 8 to the number 9, because it's all part of the same sort of spine of the team, and I'd connect them. I'd explain to them that their movements are completely mirrored. The reason being is the numbers that the team has. So I'd explain to the whole 22 players that the formation encourages the opposition to play into an area which is weakly defended. It's defended in a weak way. The width of the team that I'm coaching is defended in a weak way. So we don't want the number 4, the advancing player, to have an opportunity to play into a wide area. So the purpose of the number 8 in this picture, when the number 4 is advancing, would be, can I stay connected with my striker and encourage the player with the ball to move into a central area? So I would tell them very quickly, because I'd be mindful of how much I talk and how long my interventions are. I would explain to them that they need to be mentally connected, and I would ask them to double defend. I will ask the number 7 to move in. The purpose being will be to prevent the wide pass, the wide passage. I would ask the number 8 to move across to also prevent that opportunity to pass wide or move wide. And I'd step out and I'd watch them do it after I've demonstrated. I'd stop them. I'd say great. I'd allow them to do it again, and I'd say you're now live. I'd watch some more time for free play. I would then remind myself I've worked with the individual, number 8. I've connected number 8 to another teammate. Have I affected anybody else in that little picture? No, I haven't. So I've worked with 2 players. So I'd be aware that maybe my next opportunity to paint a picture has to include the midfield, I'd say, and more than just those 2 players. So I'd look for an opportunity to maybe bring in the number 4. I'd go through the principles of defending: composure, delay, depth, balance. I think I forgot balance earlier. Concentration. Is that all there? I'd start thinking, I'd be going through my checklist if I got that all, and I'd stop them. If the ball is still working its way in midfield, I'd stop it, and I'd say to them that they're doing a good job. I think it's important to praise the players when they're working, just to show that you do recognise effort. You might not want to be so general about the praise though, because it just sounds a little bit maybe manufactured. So I might say to the opposition, number 4 and 8, that I like the fact that they are working together, and I want them to play more passes which are going to penetrate, so passes in between, especially in between, or space, or passes which are going to ask questions of the opposition in the air, and I'd encourage them to do that. But I would stop it, and I'd stop it so that I could encourage that relationship between the midfield 3, because they're really, really important. I'd then mirror what I did previously. I'd explain to them that their jobs are to recognise, as a group of 3, the shape that they're looking to recreate, and that's going to have to be a triangle. I'd ask them to recognise that the triangle can't be too big, because giving away space means that we're less likely to be effective as a defensive unit. So I'd then allow the number 4 and the 8 of the opposition team to play the ball across the line, across the width of their midfield, and I'd do the movement with the midfield 3. I would take the place of the number 4, because I would say to number 4 that your job is so important because you see so much, and in this triangle you're providing the depth for the team. So that means you have to have that composure to call what you see, and we travel as the ball travels. So I'd ask the ball to travel from the opposition, and I would physically move with them to show them when we make it predictable. Because of the depth we have, we are quite a safe unit. We can make it predictable, and I'd be moving with them from side to side. But I'd explain to them the disadvantages of moving from side to side because of the formation. So I'd explain that they move from side to side to a point. So if the ball looks like it's going to be played really, really wide, I would ask the number 7 to track back. That's going to be their responsibility there. It's a lot of running, but I'd expect them to do that. I'd expect them to be athletic. If the ball looks like it's being played wide and our midfield diamond haven't made it in time, I would instruct the 7 to drop back. I would also instruct the 2 to then also slide across. So what I'm doing there is I'm then going to explain that we're going to be connecting all the players almost. I would allow that to play, so we'd watch that happening. I would then manage the opposition with the quality maybe of the passes that they do, and maybe with the direction of their play. So if we spent a long time over here, I'd ask them to see if they can play on the other side. So if that ball goes wide, we know that's our vulnerable area. I'm going to be asking the wide players, so the 11 and the 3, if they can come across quicker, because those are the vulnerable areas for us. So if they look to play wide and our midfield 3 can't get there, our number 11 will get there and our number 3 will get there. As the 3 slides across, our 6 slides across, our 5 slides across, our 2 will operate half and half, so not much further than the far post. And that is just to make sure that they don't overcommit. So I'd stand back and I'd watch and I'd observe to see whether or not I've given relevant points, whether the points are realistic. I would consider whether or not we've identified the objectives within the practice. Have I worked on how I want them to press? I'd look at the midfield again, because I think midfield's so important with defending. And I'd look at whether or not we nailed did we really emphasise protection of the wide areas by pushing the opposition into midfield. I think maybe we wouldn't have done that, so I might even revisit it. I might revisit that and explain about body positioning and give some technical detail. Body positioning and who does what. So if one person advances slightly, somebody else becomes the cover, and the furthest player becomes the balance. That's the triangle. So I'd watch, and if I saw an opportunity to go in and coach that, I would coach that and emphasise that with the midfield 3. I'd then think to myself, have I highlighted and managed the different scenarios? So if the ball is played through, I think I kind of managed that with the sliding across. And if the ball's played wide, I managed that with asking the 7 and 11, or 7 or 11, to track back, and asking the 3 and 2 to slide across quickly, recognising the trigger. So I think I worked on that, and then I'd think to myself, what's the objective? When and how to drop, when and how to press. So one thing I would have realised at that point, if I stop and watch, is that we haven't done much with aerial passes. So I might change again where I'm standing. So now I'm going to change where I'm standing to allow myself to see what it is that I need my players to see. I'm going to stand in the final third, almost parallel with the goalkeeper, so that I can see just downfield, well, upfield I guess. So what I'm going to be encouraging the opposition to do now, so in my management of the opposition, I'm going to explain to them that I want to see more aerial passes. When that happens, I will watch and see what the team do, what the back four do. I would stop it, and I'd manage the shape of the back four. I'd give them their roles in relation to where the ball is. I'd explain that the player nearest the ball would be the pressing player, the covering player would be after that player, and the player who adds balance would be the one next to that, the further centre back, and the player on the further side, furthest fullback. So, for example, number 3, that player would be the one who would manage the potential switch of play. But then I'd explain it's actually a back 5, so I'd then work with the goalkeeper. I'd be mindful as well, again, of how long my intervention is. So with the goalkeeper, I'd explain that we may not get an opportunity to press and have a pressing player because the opposition are now providing different types of passes or attacks. This is an aerial attack. I need you to manage the spaces between yourself and the back 4. I don't want the back 4 retreating if it looks as if we're going to get an aerial attempt. We don't want the back 4 to retreat so far that they end up being really, really close to the goalkeeper. If it's going to be a pass up in the air, we need them to recognise when to drop, so it will be a new trigger for them. When that player looks like they're about to raise their foot, we drop. When there's pressure on the ball, so if we've got a player who is chasing back, so there's pressure on the ball, then we know that we press. So when there is pressure on the ball, we advance slightly. When there's no pressure, we drop slightly, but we don't drop all the way back and become almost goalkeepers as a back 4. I'll encourage the goalkeeper to recognise that and manage that within the team. I'll then allow for the free play. I'll watch to see whether or not I have affected the players that I needed to affect, the key players. Who were the key players? Did I really paint the pictures clearly enough? Did I affect the units that they're working within? Did I then affect the whole team? Did I address the objective? Did I give enough technical detail? And I'd probably be concerned about the technical detail, especially with the back 4, because it's about defending, really, isn't it? So I would have thought to myself, maybe there's a chance that with the goalkeeper in the back 4, maybe I could have worked a bit more with them. And I'd start going through a little checklist in my head. What could I emphasise more? Well, I know what, it's maybe just their starting position. So I'd probably leave it for a couple of minutes, and then I'd go back in and I'd work with the back 5. I'd work with the back 5 in terms of the goalkeeper's starting position. I'd want the goalkeeper to start a little bit higher up the field, depending on where the ball is. But generally, I'd encourage the goalkeeper to be a little bit higher up the field, but concentrated. So part of our principles again, so that they understand when the trigger might occur for them to recognise when to drop. And for them, how they drop, we don't want the goalkeepers to be crossing their legs when they're maybe shuffling. We don't want the goalkeepers to be flat-footed, so we need them to be ready. And with the defence, I'd say to them again that they need to have a ready stance, so physically ready to drive forward as the ball's transferred, or literally just physically managing the spaces between them. So I'd use that as my input for the technical detail. I'd watch to see whether or not they're executing that. I'd observe the team. I'd think about the topic again. Pressing to advantage. What did I miss? Maybe pressing, if I done enough pressing. So I might stop and say to the team I'm coaching, right, when you lose it, your mentality is going to change. Your mentality is going to change, but only in one area, just to make it a little bit more realistic so we don't get them running around all over the place without any control. And I'll say to the midfielders, when you lose it, you've got 3 seconds to get it back. If you don't get it back in 3 seconds, I'm gonna take a point away from you, and you start with 10. And I'll stand back, and I'll watch, and I'll say to them, this is called 3 seconds of fury. Midfield 3 seconds of fury, and I'll remind them about the sliding, I'll remind them about their roles, I'll remind them about the connections that they have with the fullback and with the attacking player, and I'll remind them about deceleration. 3 seconds of fury, and I'll watch them just to see whether or not we get the press as well as getting the drop. And that for me would be that should be the topic, I think, hopefully.